virtual reality is so much more than just games or fun tricks. For years, brands like Facebook, Google, Netflix, and YouTube have pushed VR forward. Then, Apple dropped their Vision Pro headset and boom, VR headsets are back in the spotlight. But this time, it feels a bit different, you know? It's not just for the tech-savvy or nerdy gamers, it's starting to be for everyone. Yeah, the price tag is still pretty much the opposite of for everyone, but you cannot ignore the online hype around this thing. Instagram Reels, TikToks, different reviews, articles, with YouTube basically turning into a virtual showcase of a day in the life with Apple Vision Pro, it became clear to me that this device is more than just a hit. It has the potential to become a cultural phenomenon. And this got me thinking about good old VR movies. Is there a future for them? Are we on the verge of the long-awaited revolution in virtual reality cinema? Or is VR destined to be only dominated by video games and other interactive experiences? Today, I invite you to reflect on the potential of VR movies, discuss all the benefits that this technology can bring to our movie-watching experience, and also look at the problems that are currently preventing VR cinema from changing how we watch stories. In this video, I'll break things down using the classic yes, but approach. I'll start by talking about a benefit of VR movies, and then, to stay critical of things, I'll hit you with a but, or maybe a few buts. Imagine watching your favorite movie. Awesome, right? Now, think about actually being in that movie, surrounded by your favorite characters, or even being one of them yourself. 3D movies let you see objects come out of the screen, but VR movies let you step inside them. And this is a significant advantage of virtual reality, because it addresses the desire of modern viewers for a more immersive storytelling experience.
They're here. They're winning.
You see, we as viewers want to move beyond passive observation to deeper connections with the narrative, even in traditional cinema. This advancement in storytelling, influenced by the gaming industry, has profoundly impacted modern filmmaking. If you are curious to learn more, I discuss this topic in detail in another video on my channel, so feel free to check it out later. Unlike traditional films, VR allows viewers to actively explore immersive environments in a 360-degree field of view, enhancing their connection to the story and breaking down barriers between them and the content. And it's not only about video. Spatialized audio adds another layer of depth, further reinforcing the audience's belief that they are truly embedded within the virtual world. Have you ever seen a movie in an IMAX theater? You know how the sound there is set up in a way that it feels like it moves around you, like from one side to another. Well, it's the same thing in VR, but since the audio is delivered through headphones, it creates an even more intense and emotional engagement. I personally will never forget my first time trying VR. It happened around 7 years ago, when I still lived in Latvia with my family. My dad got us this cool VR headset for our small family business, and we all took turns trying it out. I have this vivid memory of playing the game Richie's Plank Experience, and I remember the emotions I had because of it. The game is super simple. You ride an elevator up, the doors open, and boom, there's just this skinny plank hanging in the sky. And can I tell you, doing the first step was so hard for me. It felt way too real. My dad and my brother couldn't stop laughing, watching me struggling to do anything. And eventually my dad even had to hold my hands to kind of help me walk on this plank. Of course, after making the first step, the fear was almost gone. But the point is that I never felt this intense emotions from something digital, even though the quality of the game was definitely not the best and the graphics weren't photorealistic. And here could have been the first but, because it's actually a common view that the quality of VR movies is not good enough yet to make the immersive effect really work well. For example, take the 2022 HBO documentary We Met in Virtual Reality. It was filmed entirely in the VR world, and let's be honest, it doesn't look all that great. It reminds me of how VR was when I first tried it 7 years ago. But you know, I recently understood that this is actually a very big misconception, and there are so many very good looking and very interesting VR short films that were made even 7 years ago. Have you ever heard of 360 Google Spotlight Stories? It's an amazing project and I really recommend you to check their YouTube channel. The idea of the project was to offer a new form of storytelling and let people view the movie not only in VR headset but also by simply using their phone. If you try watching one of their videos, you'll see that the picture follows the movement of your phone, or you can also just move the screen using your finger. In 2015, they created their first live-action story called Help, directed by Justin Lin, the director famous for the Fast and Furious movies. I think it was one of the first examples that showcased how a new form of storytelling can look like. The film was so impressive that it even won a Cannes Gold Lion Award for virtual reality and technological achievement in 2016. People online loved it too, and many said it's the future of movies. But the accessibility and comfort of use. I think that the first big but is that there are so many obstacles to the use of VR headsets. Firstly, VR headsets are still too expensive, and this simply prevents widespread adoption of the technology among the general public. Of course, you can say that you can always go to a VR cinema, but there are not so many of them out there, and I think people will be more comfortable wearing their own VR headset and also being in the comfort of their own home. So I think the technology and market are the main barriers right now. Once the tech becomes easier and cheaper, more people will give it a try. Another big problem is how physically uncomfortable it can be to wear a VR headset for a long time. You know, I remember doing this one business training in virtual reality, and while I liked everything about it, I got a headache after just 10 minutes. The pressure of the headset on my face was just way too much. You know, when you use virtual reality headset, you have to strap it on tight to avoid any gaps here, otherwise the image gets distorted. And I remember that even though the training was very interesting, I kept adjusting the headset every 5 minutes because it was so uncomfortable. And that training lasted for 20 minutes or 30 minutes max. When I imagine sitting like this for an hour or two, well, the thought isn't very attractive. There's also an issue with the image getting a bit weird. It's kind of like why many people, myself included, don't enjoy watching movies in 3D. It can get pixelated and blurry, and the fisheye effect around the edges can be really distracting. As you move your head, what looked fine in front of you gets stretched at the edges. It happens because of the merging of 2D recordings, which are then stitched together to be presented in 3D space. Plus, in most VR movies, the camera stays still, so if you move your head, it feels weird, like the world is moving with you, which isn't very pleasant. So I think that VR needs to overcome these challenges to become more user-friendly. The next exciting benefit is that VR opens up endless possibilities for storytelling, breaking the boundaries of traditional filmmaking and giving way to fresh ideas. People are always hungry for something new, and when it comes to video, lately there's been a trend toward exploring new things with 360-degree space. I recently celebrated New Year in New York, and one thing that I kept seeing everywhere, besides my favorite $1 slice pizza, were these 360 video booths. They were literally everywhere. Even though they seemed really funny and a bit absurd on the streets, it made me realize that people are actually turning to this 360-degree world in search of something new, something that would allow them to stand out. Many videographers have been also experimenting with professional 360 cameras, adding fresh movements to their work. We've even seen VR influences in traditional games played on flat screens. For instance, my boyfriend played Cyberpunk last year, and while watching him play, I noticed a very interesting feature that they added to the cutscenes. Instead of just watching the scene from fixed angles chosen by the developers, you could switch between different cameras during the action, which, according to my boyfriend, added a whole new level of immersion. This made me realize that VR features are starting to show up in traditional games, hinting at a shift towards VR cinema.
You know, times are changing.
In addition to revolutionizing how we watch movies, VR cinema has the potential to influence the creative process behind them. While more traditional films focus on carefully framed shots, VR cinema allows filmmakers to experiment with new angles, perspectives, motion, and narrative techniques impossible in traditional filmmaking. For example, there is a really cool Canadian studio called Felix and Paul Studios. They create many different immersive VR experiences on various themes and have won multiple awards, including 2 Emmys in 2017 and 2021. The first Emmy was for a short VR film about Barack and Michelle Obama, and the second was for the largest production ever filmed in space, the series Space Explorers, showing life on the International Space Station. They've also worked on behind-the-scenes movie for Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs and other interesting projects. But what really caught my attention was their 2017 virtual reality comedy called Miyubi. It's a 40-minute film about a Japanese toy robot given to a young boy on his birthday, and you, the viewer, inhabit the robot. As the boy's family starts to break apart over the year, you experience love, fear, and your eventual obsolescence in a funny and intimate way. I think it's a perfect example of VR movie with real actors, and I think it perfectly illustrates what I mean when I say that it can offer something truly unique and something truly new. The genius of Miyubi lies in using VR's spatial and experiential features to fully immerse viewers in the story, making them essential to the narrative. This enriches the storytelling with emotions and interactive engagement that traditional films can't match. And there are many other interesting cases like this. For example, I can highly recommend checking out animated VR films like Gloomy Eyes, The Great Sea, Wolves in the Wall, and Paper Birds. So all of this is nice, but the film industry is very conservative. Another big barrier to VR movie adoption in the film industry is its traditional mindset. Filmmaking has stuck to certain ways of doing things for years, creating a comfort zone that many are afraid to step out of. This resistance isn't actually just about clinging to the past. It's also because of the huge financial and logistical structures built around traditional movie making. Virtual reality requires new techniques, special gear, and different viewing setups, shaking up the way things have always been done. It's also about being cautious with new storytelling methods and distribution models that VR brings. So this conservative attitude slows down the integration of virtual reality into mainstream cinema. Despite VR being around for a while now, big studios haven't jumped on board with major VR projects yet. Just think about how cool it would be if Disney or Marvel made their own VR experiences. But it hasn't happened yet, which makes you wonder why. Even though there are so many benefits and opportunities with VR, most examples we see are either low-budget indie productions or big tech companies investing in films. But at the same time, we can also see some of well-known filmmakers like Steven Spielberg or Wes Anderson showing interest in using virtual reality. It's not just about creating VR experiences like Wes Anderson does, but also about the stories told in traditional movies. Spielberg's Ready Player One in 2018 used virtual reality both as a plot device and a storytelling tool, sparking discussions about the future of cinema. So, while virtual reality is slowly gaining recognition in the industry, it's still got a ways to go. I'm sure many of you have noticed this trend over the past few years. It's everywhere. People are getting tired of overly polished Instagram photos, heavily edited YouTube videos, and movies with tons of special effects. They are craving something real, something authentic that doesn't overload their senses. And maybe this is the perfect time for VR movies to make a big splash in the film industry, offering immersive stories that truly engage audiences. I know it might sound strange to talk about VR being real, because while at first glance it takes us far away from reality and into the virtual world, like straight into the Matrix. But VR isn't just about escaping reality. Let me illustrate this point with the story of Jonathan Griffith, a talented mountain climber and photographer. His 2019 VR film Everest VR was truly groundbreaking. It was the first high-resolution VR film of Everest, showing a climber's challenging ascent without using bottled oxygen. Despite this innovation, Jonathan now sees the film as a failure. He might seem too critical of his own work, but he acknowledges that creating Everest VR was a learning experience that revealed the need for a different approach to filmmaking with VR technology. In an interview with Premium Beat, Jonathan said, "It's like reinventing filmmaking. Traditional media bombards us with fast cuts, action, music, and a lot of stuff to keep us engaged. We're quick to switch off now. Trying to incorporate all of this into VR can overwhelm viewers." Jonathan realized that his approach, shooting the film traditionally and then putting it into a 360 degrees timeline, wasn't right for VR. If you throw all that information at them, they can't process it while they're trying to navigate the environment you've put them in. Jonathan now spends more time in the pre-production phase, crafting the stories that feel like real moments. He admitted that doing this while holding the attention of the viewer is a massive challenge. But his new approach already paid off. His film, The Soloist, won the Best VR Story award at the Cannes VR Future Awards. Meta sponsored the movie, and even Mark Zuckerberg himself was impressed after watching it, saying he hadn't seen anything like it. And of course, from a viewer's perspective, everything is cool and extremely intriguing. We aren't limited to the director's chosen frame. We have the entire 360-degree canvas to explore. But there is a big filmmaking challenge. As a filmmaker myself, my biggest concern about VR movies is how do I make sure that the viewer doesn't miss something important? Unlike traditional movies, in VR, the audience can look anywhere, and if something important happens behind them, they might miss it. So in VR movies, filmmakers have to be both storytellers and experienced architects. They've got to come up with clever ways to guide the viewer's attention while still letting them explore freely. The environments they create need to be visually stunning and easily to navigate, adding to the story without taking over. It's a real challenge for filmmakers because if you think about it, in VR medium, traditional cinematography as we know it is practically gone. Cinematography is a huge part of filmmakers' vision, and it's one of the biggest elements that sets one director apart from another. But in virtual reality, introducing a 360-degree canvas fundamentally changes this dynamic. So I think that the big question for now is how can filmmakers adjust their storytelling techniques to keep the emotional dynamic and still tell the story they had in mind, even when viewers can actually look anywhere they want. Yep, so I can say that the journey ahead is as much about innovation as it is about imagination. I'm really curious to see how it goes in the future, but for now, one thing is clear. As VR technology evolves, so does the art of cinema, compelling us to change the way we think about movies and storytelling. Remember those 360 Google Spotlight stories that I mentioned earlier? They pushed the boundaries of VR filmmaking and won awards for their amazing films. But they didn't really help Google's VR headset, Daydream, find many fans. In fact, Google shut down the project in 2019. This tells me that the challenges we've talked about in this video might mean that it will actually take longer for VR movies to become mainstream. Or maybe VR and traditional movies will always be separate things. What do you think? Is the future of movies in virtual reality? And how will devices like Apple Vision Pro shape this future? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more about the entertainment industry, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Here I cover all the hows and whys of movies, video games, TV shows, and other aspects of our pop culture. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you later. Пока-пока!